Yeah, sort of set it lined up.
Hey guys,
Hi.
welcome. Hello everyone. Hey everyone already in the chat. Welcome, welcome. It's really nice to see everyone. A couple of people. I'm trying to go live on Instagram to say we're on here, but I just can't work out how you do that. Oh, we got on a delay there.
Sometimes.
So I'm just going to do a quick story. Hey guys, we're on YouTube. Come and join in with our live community chat and talk all about it. Bye. So I'll just put that on. Yeah, that'll do. Right, so I've popped that on there. So welcome everyone. We've had a few, I know, all the teddies. My newest one is downstairs, but these are a couple of my Christmas ones. And this fugly as well, which is super cool. I love his teeth. So we've had a couple of topics to go over. I'm going to start with what it is like to be a little, and for me, and that's what I'm going to begin with, and then pan outwards to the spectrum of it for other people. For me, it came about much later on in our relationship. We've been together 27 years, and I had been sort of in all these roles as a woman and as a mother and as a wife and as a person and as a professional and business owner and all these different things, homemaker, but wasn't able to take care of my body or stay human in lots of ways, have a physicality in lots of ways. My pain would numb out and then spike in like a really horrific type of late stages pregnancy, birthing. It was like the back was sort of ripping open and I'd get a lot of pain flood, or my bladder would zone out, and it wouldn't be until I was in a lot of bladder pain that I'd even realise I needed the toilet, and I had to really train myself to use my bladder again instead of like holding it until I was almost wetting myself, and also creating that secondary condition where you get anxious about your bladder because it can override you in that way, especially if you have hypermobile syndrome, which a lot of survivors do have. And I think I've been discussing this with a couple of survivors, where there's this thing called genetic biomarkers, where if your parents or one of your parents have had a specific trauma in their childhood, a genetic marker might go up in them, in their DNA, and then when they have you, it will be forever changed, so that if you have a traumatic childhood as well, then your genetic biomarker will be even stronger, and it goes on like that. So this connection with hypermobility, and one of the infantile childhood responses to the fight or flight is to flop, and part of that flop reflex is to flood your body with this hormone that you get a lot of when you're pregnant as well, which is a relaxing hormone, and it loosens up all your ligaments, all of your body. You're more likely to injure yourself. I did my worst injury when I was pregnant with my daughter, because I had my son in my left arm, which is my strong arm, and because I had all this relaxing hormone, I just opened the boot of the car and dislocated my shoulder, and it tore the muscle. And because I wasn't good at taking care of myself at the time, and also my mother was very good at undermining my right to take care of myself, because I was her roles in all sorts of things to complete. I suffered with that injury for a very long time before it was operated on, and then it actually had quite a big problem, same with my knee. So this relaxing hormone, I think when you have infantile trauma, or if your parents as well have had some kind of neglect or trauma in infancy, then you're more likely to have your body's biomarkers say, I need this relaxing. I'm having this very major trauma that relaxing is very good for. It will lessen the damage that my body will receive during abuse. And so living with that condition, as well as taking care of your body because you have that condition, requires you to have a body and stay in contact with it. And if you can't, and you don't have that upbringing that said in your limbic brain, you are valued, you are valid, you have rights, you're equally human as every other person, and that comes with all these rights, look at them all. If your body wasn't raised with that, you don't have this natural ability to go, oh, me too, I have this that needs caring for. And so it can do all these other things: depersonalization, dehumanization, dissociation, numbing, and a lot of those things are sort of linked to this freeze flop mechanism in postural hypertension that links with the hypermobile syndrome. You can do a lot of, when you sit up too quickly or stand up too quickly, you'll have a fainting disorder, because your hippocampus is permanently on like a fire alarm. Something's going on, and it never actually gets switched off. So that relaxing hormones constantly going around, your body doesn't get the message that, you know, we don't need to do this anymore. Our body can stiffen up and we can become our adult body, when actually our body never really gets adult. It's more likely to stay this childlike suppleness that's more likely to injure itself, especially when it's ill or when you're in stress, because then you're in the stress hormones. And the more stress hormones you have, that's what ends up causing heart attack. If you live in the levels of adrenaline that post-traumatic stress disorder keeps you, where you're scream jumping at every little thing because your nervous system is so dysregulated. Your body is flooded with so much adrenaline and cortisol, all these hormones that can weaken the heart wall and can dysregulate the heart, and you can end up getting a heart attack. And people that have to endure ongoing trauma or have lots of trauma and then a big trauma, they can end up having a heart attack. So looking after yourself is a key thing. But when you have a struggle to do that and you're dissociated from your body and you don't have all those human rights that you're brought up with, and you have all these conditions that kind of make it worse, because the less you look after the body, the more you injure yourself, because it is so fluid and flexible. The more you have accidents with your bladder, the more you get worried about the bladder, the more you have the anxiety about it, the more it feeds this other thing, the worse you get. And you're also kind of rape cultured from the start, because all these things aren't known, all these conditions of survival aren't known, and especially the thought disorders, the autopedophilia and the pedophilic obsessive compulsive disorder, that can really change the hormones in your body and how you feel about yourself, and the structuring of your brain and how it processes touch and all these other things. So I'm just going to take a quick drink because I just realised I'm getting...
Well, there's loads of people watching.
Okay, hey everyone.
Loads of people commenting, saying hi.
I'm chattering on, I'm like banging on because I'm really passionate about this. But this whole, you survive and then you're rape cultured in how you survive, because we don't want to talk about it, we don't want to see it, this, you should be over it, stop going on about it, it's all so disgusting, don't tell me about it. And it's all sort of given this air of we don't want to hear, and that re-traumatizes the child who was never heard in the first place. So we have to sort of gain the statements that allow us to state, this is how I survived and it's normal for me, and these are things I need. And you wouldn't tell any other war veteran how to survive their war. You would just go, oh, lost a leg, well, you're allowed this, this and this, and we'll get on with it, adapting your whole house towards it. We don't do that to any other veteran of survival, and we need to stop doing it to survivors of childhood abuse or neglect. And we need to start talking about what it looks like to survive. And it's not some sanitized version that just sits on a little shelf somewhere. It's painful and arduous, and it has longevity things to look after and to navigate. And you go from a mental war on a daily basis all day long. And hopefully somewhere in a community or with a relationship with a counsellor or some significant other, you do the mental gymnastics of getting your head round what happened to you and how everyone treated it. And then you get into a mental yoga that holds a boundary of rape culture outside your home and your heart and your relationship. and then a safety boundary where you have your truest expression of self that is witnessed from where it needs to be, and it isn't judged and shamed because someone down the street doesn't understand it. Well, shame on you, because I shouldn't have to explain myself for the injuries I got, how I live with them, and how I maintain my body throughout that lifetime of survival. So anyway, I've like chunted on loads. Have we had anyone that has offered any feedback or question or direction of whether they want to take that?
No, everyone's just saying hi.
So just welcome everyone.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're all talking with each
Angel
other.
Baby says, I don't know if you remember me, I used to be zombie little.
Hey, I've been
I've
thinking
missed
about
so
you.
much.
I've been thinking about you so much.
Rachel Curious says, hello, this is my first time here. Your room is so divine. Xbox Ray says, how are you doing? Shy Baby Girl says, hello. Baby Cece says, yay, I find you watch live.
Hey.
Maria Mini waves. I'm drinking beer.
So are you.
That's what I'm telling Chris Taylor. He's asking me, is that coffee or tea? So I'm drinking beer. Yeah, okay.
Out of a beer mug that's for the smallest pub in Britain called The Nutshell, which is in a place where our friends live, and it's so cute. It's just like a tiny weeny little room, and there's this dead cat hanging above the thing that is linked to this whole historic thing. Yeah, it's like a good luck thing. Yeah, it's really cool. So anyway, my being little came about from getting very good at my roles and better at being a body with a self that's had things happen that I need to look after, but not wholly configured into a full person yet. And I had a bit of counselling, and I was studying and becoming a counsellor, and did all that process and wrote my book and started the charity, and then gradually started working in all these different areas until I found Little Space by accident for a client who I was just researching on the basis of her presenting very childlike as an adult. And I was thinking, let me just look into this. Let me write a few things into Google and see what comes up. And one of them was Little Space. And it just, my whole body responded to it. It was like, oh my God, this is it. This is what we've been missing. And my heart like yearned. I could almost come to tears remembering the moment, because I just felt so like I'd found a portal that made sense to me. And I thought, when I started looking into neuroscience and the traumatized mind of an infant, visiting it at a space that makes sense to where the wound was made, just suddenly my whole world shifted. And I thought, oh my God, that's where I've been going wrong all this time. I've been feeding my wounded child part qualifications, studying book after book after book, all of these different documentaries and series about the investigations of child abuse and paedophilia and minor attraction, and just like absorbing all of this knowledge that wasn't healing this 0 to 6-year-old whatsoever, maybe even making it worse. And by the time my body really started reacting to me, and I've got a fractured spine, and I have these procedures on it every now and then, which they've now stopped because of this incident, where I was having injections in my spine to numb out the spine because it's all collapsing and all this different stuff, and that's why my bladder's weak and blah blah blah. But the surgeon wasn't doing anything wrong. I think he was trying to soothe me in some way. He was very chatty. He knew that I had PTSD. He wanted to keep me calm, but he was engaging too much and moving my body slightly in a rocking motion, and then touched the top of my thigh in just like a nice way. But it was like my body did not take it that way, and I had a seizure, and that's when my seizures started. And I was just having them fairly regularly because of a film, or because of what was it? Game of Thrones. One scene in Game of Thrones where Hodor was holding the door shut, and it triggered a memory of me holding the door shut. And then this other one, Pool of Blood, and there was a few memories of Pool of Blood that would trigger this whole seizure, fainting, puking, wetting, psychosis, regression, where I would then say a statement that matched what was going on, why it was triggered, and what it had triggered. That was perfectly formed around the sentence of one of the blood ones was, I was touched in my bloody nightie, which is about the night I went to hospital and had my lip stitched. And the surgeon there did something that evening. And it was always a statement that made sense to what's happened, that we could put piece together afterwards, that then would show that my body was trying to give up its information. And probably because I was ignoring it so much. So this portal of little space for me, and building and contracting and spending the time to contract this quite serious dynamic in our relationship, because it stemmed around trauma. It was a very serious longevity plan that we gradually and tentatively, really thoughtfully stepped into. That's Dexter at the door. And once we did, and we made the safe space where we looked after what could go wrong and had a real look at like what could go wrong and how would I respond and what should I do in that situation, and talked about the fears of, you know, my husband feeling really like, you're always going to be my adult wife who looks really cute, and I wouldn't ever want to, because I'm just loving you, feel like I've triggered you in some way because I've you know gone from adult in a relationship and misread the cue that we're in little space or whatever, which you can't really, but these are all the things that you talk about before the contracting and practicing began, because you're wanting to make sure the safety is there, that everyone is feeling safe for this, working in this dynamic and working out what it's there for and what you're healing and what you're working on and how you might need responding to, or what you might need in terms of that little space and that dynamic and that relationship. So for me, little space is a very restorative place. It's about soothing my nervous system. Over Christmas, we did very little actual visiting little space in terms of a activity like story time or what have you, because Papa was like poorly. He didn't have COVID, he had a test, but he just had a really bad flu-y cold for about 3 weeks. It just knocked it out of him. And when someone just doesn't feel themselves, they haven't got the role in them. And it's still there on a daily basis. I was there all day knowing that my little was loved by their papa and he cared about me. He just had no energy and felt poorly right now. So it was still looked after. It just wasn't visited in those portal kinds of way. We're going to go and do a story time, or we're going to do a playtime, or we're going to do a bath time, or I'm going to brush your hair, or I'm going to pick your outfit and we're going to get dressed, or we're going to go out for a walk or an outing. So those things were absent, but all the things that were there in the background of it, that are the wholesome, just day-to-day activities of checking in and kissing my forehead and talking with them as a part of self. And there's a new study that shows if you talk to yourself like someone else, talk about yourself like you're someone else, or parts of yourself like they're parts of you, you're more likely to look after them and boundary their needs and respond to them, because you're treating them like someone else. You're treating them like you would anyone else instead of just yourself, which you don't really treat very well. So that thing of naming your little space child parts and naming your caregiver part, so that in that word it holds a whole load of dynamic that says we're here now, and from here I can more easily communicate my needs. I can say I'm thirsty. I don't have to say, darling, next time you get up, would you get me a drink? Don't rush, because there's no worry while I'm secretly like in a desert mouth. But when you're like storing your movement and your pain up for being settled and not wanting to get up, like that thing of getting up is hard when it's involving you either going through a fainting thing and then feeling not very well for a while, or being in pain because of I'm just realizing I'm in a lot of pain right now, and I think it's because I've not had my tablets. No, I haven't. Would you get me them? Thank you. I'm just sat here talking about it thinking I'm in a lot of pain. What is that? But it's just because I've run out. I think when we're getting ready for this, the adrenaline kicks up, and then I can like totally forget my pain for a little bit, and then it kicks in. So anyway, looking after your body, having the rights to talk about it in terms of I'm thirsty, and my papa being totally able-bodied and going, yeah, I'll get up and get you a drink right now, because then I'll go to the toilet as well. Or I was just thinking I was going to go in there at the next break or whatever. So it gives you that ability to flex that muscle of being safe enough to just say, I've got a need, and trust this person that you're building this relationship with wants to fulfill that need because they care. And the more that we communicate those baselines, thank you, Papa. Thank you. Brilliant, thank you. The more that you can communicate those needs and practice that, the less you do this other thing where you hold in, you might expect them to like just know, or do that mind reader thing, or you've done enough passive aggressive things for them to know by now. But like some men or women have a narrow spectrum of feeling or perception or ability to perceive your mood compared to their own, and they don't get your signals, and they are absolutely lost in the dark of why all of a sudden like we've got all these big feelings around and I didn't even see them coming, like what's going on, wow. And it, within that practice of being allowed to go, oh, I've been triggered by something, let me just cry for a bit or whatever, or after the emotion where you can't speak, you're just having feelings, you have a debrief and say, look, this is what happened, next time these are the helpful things, these are the unhelpful things, but no one's done anything wrong, I just got triggered, you just triggered me, no one meant to, we don't have to take any of it personally, we just need to learn from it and get better at navigating the fact that I'm a survivor and you're you, in whatever fashion that looks like. So being allowed to sort of look at what your survival looks like and the branches of it. So how many things, it's like a comorbidity where you have lots of things to look after in terms of survival. People don't realize this postural hypertension, this hypermobile syndrome, this PTSD, all of these different things that can link into, oh, I've got quite a mixed bag of things to look after, just as an autoimmune response, and a parasympathetic nervous system response, and just the way my brain goes, because I've got PTSD and that's the way my brainstem works now. Like all these stigmas and disgust reflexes and rape cultures against the very act of surviving and being miraculous in that, it just boggles the mind. So when you get over the fact that it's a bit weird for the vast majority of people, because, well, if you've had a great childhood, well, that's really a privileged, lovely position to be from, and I'm very happy for you. I wouldn't ever wish this upon anyone. I'm so pleased that you have a normal nervous system and you have a configured sense of self, and you stay a human being in a body and have human rights all the time and are allowed to rest and play and fantasize without judging yourself and all these things. But I don't, and not because I'm bad or stupid or rubbish or I haven't put enough effort in or whatever. It's because my body is fundamentally changed forever because of what it was put through. And then you're allowed to go, right, you've got missing limbs, you've got to change this, you've got to structurally reform who you are every day. That's fine. Let's go with the program because of looking after who you are and what you need from your perspective. And if it includes little space, then you like make that precious and hold it protected as a really making sense place to visit, as a portal to actually reconnect with your body and yourself and find a part of yourself that allows you to look after yourself more, but also as a portal to let out blocked feelings or practice parts of the brain that weren't given that practice in childhood. Practice, like, I think that's where brattiness comes from, where you're allowed to just say and do and be and have and not be all of a sudden and just change your mind and all those things, because maybe you had that neglected childhood where you had to always be seen and not heard and not even seen maybe, and punished in lots of ways or shamed, and that feeling of letting out that blocked energy that was never allowed to say it at the time or stand up for itself or had that ability to, because it's just an infant or a child, is really profoundly therapeutic if it's taken through a structured contracting in a therapeutic space of a relationship that is aiming to look after it. If it comes, I worry about it if you go towards it from a kink space, that if you have trauma, that you're looking after your trauma first before you're experiencing it through your kink space, or separating out the two so that you're not getting re-triggered or you're not doing reshaming work, because the adult part might like kinks like masochism or something, but to link it to the child part might re-trigger a traumatization of being neglected or abused, or what's that word where you traumatized over again in a certain way. But I've lost my train of thought because I was trying to think of that word. Little space. Anyway, have we had much?
Yeah, loads.
Okay, let's hear some feedback.
Okay. Rachel Curious says, do you think it's possible to make a dismissive, avoidant partner / daddy open up and confess how they feel?
That depends, because it depends on what has caused that shutdown. And if it's being hunted down by a female figure in childhood, then you hunting them down as a female figure in adulthood is probably not going to be helpful. So working out why they shut down, and also respecting that, and I'm generalizing here, but in that generalization, a lot of male entities need that cave space to work out their feelings. And when they do work them out, they have about 1,000 less words than a woman would have to explain her perspective of the situation. So when they even do come back together to talk about it, it feels like they haven't come back with all the words. And actually, no, that's all the words. And I've like gone to my cave and like sorted them all out for you, and now I've presented them, and there's still not enough. And it feels like, oh, there's this sort of, if that happens, and it can feel like, why bother? And then I'll shut myself down because it doesn't ever end in goodness. So working out why they shut down is the first thing, and like respecting that, and just seeing it as a difference of brain, and no one's right or wrong. The person that wants to sit there and talk it through till the end and then go to bed, friends, is equally as valid as the person that needs to go to bed to sleep on it and then have a talk about it in the morning without taking any of that personally, because it's okay if you need to sleep on it. But when there's a difference, you can get into that sort of right and wrongness where one person is the right way and the other person isn't, in both edges. And if you're getting attacked from it, it's more likely that you would defend that space, and then you're not really hearing the other at all. You're only defending your own space. And when you're in a couple, if you find yourself defending your own space, you're not seeing it from a couple space anymore. And then you've got to go, oh, wait there, I'm in my amygdala. Nothing gets worked out from your amygdala, because all you're doing is scared animal. That's all you're talking from, not from longevity partner and all these other debriefs we've had and everything I know about you and how you love me and how I love you and all these things, but from unsafe animal. And so once you recognize that you're doing that, either of you, you can go, whoa, wait there, we're not communicating anymore. We're scared, and then trigger responses. So if you can like gift yourself the right to have your feelings, but always have them in equal to the other person's feelings. I'm going to have my feelings, and then I'm going to hear yours. And then I'm going to have some more feelings, and then you're going to have some more feelings. But also how their amygdalas work in working out how they feel. Some people go emotion to feeling very quickly, and other people take a minute or a weekend or a week or a few weeks, depending on where they are in their maturity. And anyone with a brain less than 26-year-old isn't in a fully functioning adult brain yet, so they don't have all their skills to navigate all these things. And I think that's why that's a lot where there's a lot of gatekeeping and quite strong boundaries around minors in kink, because they have less skill in their prefrontal cortex to contract such a complex relationship within a substructure of because regression is submission, so you are submitting, and it is that dominant submissive dynamic and a power distribution that children and minors and young teenagers and early adults don't often always have the practice, the skill, the words, the relationship in all of their brain, the ability to stay in all of their brain if they're triggered. Their human rights to be like, well, I'm a person too, instead of just your person and whatever part of that person you want today. And that's where that thing comes in, because when it gets into heavily this kink dynamic where everything is structured into a role play type situation, you're less and less able to be a fluid self that has these parts that just comes and goes in a fluid motion of being allowed, and into a one person is dictating their need and which head they're going to spin round on their dolly today. And that can create undercurrents of shame cycles, of reducing human rights, of reducing your attachment to your body, of being able to be injured because you have less attachment to your body, or your stress hormones are getting increased, your relaxin is going. You can do all these things that can then, if they're not in a relationship that looks after that as a portal to release stuck energy or emotions or words from a time and place, it then becomes this lackadaisical someone else's need that you'll putty in their hands, rather than this really structured, thoughtful visiting of different spaces in a contracted way that also looks after these parts of self on a daily basis in a natural way. It sort of compartmentalizes it too much for it to become something. It then objectifies it rather than becomes it. It separates it rather than configurates it. It puts it on a shelf rather than homes it. So I really believe in all of the gatekeeping, the hard boundaries, and everyone's strong feelings around keeping minors safe in a online kink space community. But I also hold that right for teenagers to blossom, and they're the first ones to have been born online basically, and discover themselves and express themselves and know how to use it all and learn a lot from it. And a lot of them were brought up on it, and to stop them from looking and visiting in a quiet way something that makes sense to them, I feel would like block them in the very part that they're in, which is puberty and connecting to body and their body, their rules, and how that equates to their self and their sexuality and their sensuality and other and their childhood and their future and all these other things. It's through the gradual safe exposure of being around things and being attracted to certain things and being not to others, and finding yourself in them, finding yourself, parts of yourself, through the seeing of other people, how they represent it, and knowing that they feel like I can self-identify with that, or there's something in that I like, knowing that they're not ready for it, that they're not in a place to communicate that, but feeling like it's nice to know. And I would never undermine anyone's personal hard-fought perspective of who they are through the experience of other. When someone's self-identified with something, it's a visceral thing. Like, you can't tell them that they don't feel that. So looking after them in their gradual blossoming and that right to blossom, it's again not punishing the would-be victim, boundarying the perpetrator, and creating an open, educated, transparent, with boundaries, space that looks after everyone in it. Otherwise, it can get subverted and become much more dangerous, because teenagers feel like they're not being seen or heard, and they are being extricated from their very thing, which is puberty. So I don't know, there's a lot there. And also teenagers that run ahead and they're presenting themselves in a way that really could put them in danger, because they're using hashtags that could encourage or advertise a certain response of people who are in the kink community. And if they're coming from a sexual space and sexualized, objectified space, they're not going to treat you so much like a precious human being whom they love and care about, and who they really want to keep safe in their contracting. They'll just want to contract you into bed or whatever, so that they get their needs met, because you don't know each other yet. They don't care about you yet. They might not even have the capacity to care. You don't know who you're inviting in that space. So all of that is all. And also, you've got to also say there's a lot of people who are doing catfishing, and they're pretending to be minors, or they're pretending to be in a kink because they want to out something that they disagree with or whatever. And it all becomes really like a game of wits, really, because you're trying to make something genuine and create a safe space for people to communicate a need or access a part of themselves or reset their nervous system. And sorry, it's not with yoga, it's with masochism or little space or BDSM or whatever. And that doesn't make sense to you. I have the right to do something that makes sense for me. So that brings me on to the next topic.
Before you go on the next topic.
Yeah. Oh, did I answer the previous person's question about?
I think so.
Yeah.
What would you say to a little who's also going through bipolar manic episodes?
I get this a lot as well. And it's hard because when I'm feeling, I call it fast, I just feel really fast all the time. Or sometimes I feel really slow and everyone else is really fast. It just depends. And when you're in this hyper state, so you're hyper aroused, your PTSD can be worse because you are hyper aroused, and you can make less logical sense because you're in this manic feeling where you could feel a bit superhero-ish, or you've got all the energy in the world, or you haven't really got a body, you can't feel any of your pain today. Like, you're not realizing that you're in a chemical imbalance that's hiding your pain, and you are still doing really bad damage to your back right now because you're pretending you've got like no problem with it. And so did she say about little space and mania?
Yeah.
So with little space and mania, finding that soothing spot.
To a little who was going through bipolar manic episodes.
Yeah. So what I would say is I would try and, like you would a child who is stressed or struggling or having too much energy or being hyper aroused, you would find a way to soothe them. And that might be through a nicely cut up little snack whilst watching a really low-key, a soothing type childlike program or movie, or listening to lullabies, or having a story time that allows you, with a dummy and a blankie, that allows you to just go with the feelings. I'm feeling really manic, but accessing that portal to soothe them somewhat. And that soothing mechanism, if you repeat it into a habit, your body will start responding to in its nervous system. It will start receiving it like medicine that says, oh, this soothes me, because you put it into the habit of your system. So when you're feeling too fast, going portaling and sort of directing yourself into little space, and maybe beginning with a little space activity that can get rid of some energy, like putting on a children's yoga routine, or that wake up shake up type thing where they're all like doing jumping jacks and starbursts and flowers growing and stuff, and like do something that gets rid of your energy, some screaming into a pillow, some punching on the bed or whatever, and then be like, right, now I'm going to find my soothing spot. Like especially in lockdown, we don't have a lot of access to going outside and doing activities and outings, but still you're allowed to go out and exercise. So if that is in little space, then do it. And it might be that you do, because I never used to run like a normal child. I used to do these side things, these like side jumps, and I was really fast when I would do them. Like I could beat a lot of people running, but I wasn't allowed to do that because that's not running. So you know, go out and do some like whatever running you want to do, or some bike riding, or you know, go down to the pond and feed the ducks, whatever, so that you can release some of the energy from child part, but also direct it into soothing, I would say. If that gives you any answer. If you want to develop it or ask me more or direct me, just say something else and I'll give you more information, or if you direct me for where I'm going. And if I haven't answered any of the others, the previous girl that was saying about her boyfriend, direct me again and I'll come back to it.
Yeah. Baby Cece says, my little space is still kink, but it's non-sexual. Is that okay?
Of course.
Kink
isn't always sexual, and it's just a portal to release feelings. So if it feels like it's, when you say it's a kink space but not sexual, is it that you're not doing regression, you're not regressing to a space, it's not a dissociative part or part of self that needs looking after, it's more a kink dynamic that you visit when you're with a certain person or you're in a certain space with yourself? Tell me more, because we can develop talking about that if you want to further.
Yeah. And lots of people saying thank you. What you're saying is very soothing. Yeah, there's lots of people commenting and chatting, agreeing with what you're saying, chatting away as you're saying things. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll get on to the next topic, which was the difference between age regression and abdl play, or ddlg, or whatever, kink space. And I've looked into this because a lot of people have very strong feelings about this, and I can see why. But I always like to keep the spectrum open with safety and transparency, rather than gatekeeping and narrowing down that creates subversion and distancing of our most vulnerable group, which is our teenagers. So we've got to get that balance between inclusion in a safe way and boundarying in a way that they can, because teenagers are beginning their self-governance and their autonomy and their knowledge of self, and they're not going to be told what they feel or think, and they're not going to be bullied into being safe. We have to encourage that safety by showing them the way and showing them with respect, that we appreciate them and we respect them and we respect their safety, and these are the ways we're doing that, so that they can sort of navigate it easier. But when I've looked into it so that I don't get it wrong, age regression is up the end of therapeutic space, and it doesn't have to be with a counselor who does age regression. It can be within a safe relationship that has contracted it specifically. And what that looks like is talking about why you're doing it, what the triggers are, what the soothing mechanisms are, what you might even write out a script that shows a whole storytelling of what you're trying to process or recover, or what the scene should look like if you're going to do a bath time or a story time or an outing, or whatever. And on all the things that I've read, it says it's not sexual, which I disagree with, because if you have had sexual trauma as an infant or child, your regression includes sexual trauma. So whether it is sexual that I am actively going there because I feel sexual towards it, or it's I have a sexual wound, it's still sexual. So to say age regression isn't sexual is to undermine, I think rather dangerously, the space that it's visiting, which could hold sexual trauma. And if you do it that way, you could end up re-traumatizing your child part, restarting a shame cycle, rape culturing them all over again, and not really hearing what the space is. So I don't agree with everything I've read over the last few days and before, with the fact that it's never sexual, it's not sexual, it's not sexual. They really underpin that, when actually I disagree. I really disagree. So the whole sexual, not sexual thing, I feel like we need to stop making that the pivotal point, because it sort of invalidates the whole space, and it also creates a dark and a light, as if sexual and non-sexual are somehow they're in war against each other, or one's over here and one's over there, when actually, when you lay down all the boundaries, a lot of these people are either in a personage trauma because they have autism with age and body and gender and sexuality dysphoria and sliding, or non-binary type, how am I going to feel today? It could be a male, female, or asexual and non-gendered. You just don't know how you're going to feel each day. As well as survivors who have a whole load of neuroscience and nervous system and genome markers, genetic biomarkers that present in all these different ways. So I feel like when we take all that away, we can see that everyone might, if you haven't come to terms with where it's come from, and that actually it probably is something to do with sex somewhere, then you're in conflict with that. And that's why we need these, we're over here not sexual and you're over there sexual, and then they're all like, don't like make us the bad guys, or then come and visit our space and like get in the way of me being able to do my thing over here, or earn my money doing this thing or whatever. So it gets all a bit warry, and everyone gets it up in each other's grills and is a bit like sensitive and having very strong feelings. And I totally get it all. I can see how complex it is and how much interweave there is, and how much comorbid, disordered and different conditions there would be that could like bring this up within a spectrum of things. That when someone becomes the gatekeeper of this specific way, it's not quite that specific way because I feel it like this, and I think that creates all of this monologue, or this them and us type talk. And I wish that we could all just be people who all see it differently. That's the whole point. We're all unique people. And if we can just say, I use this term like this, this is how it is for me, I'm making this space like this, these are my boundaries because it's my workspace, or I have it, it is sexualized, or it is my kink, blah, blah, blah. Or I'm just representing this thing that I don't present as sexual. Even if they haven't come to terms with underneath that it may be, we're not the ones that should make them force feed that knowledge right now. They might not be ready for that, and it takes a long time to come to terms with how your body and your brain has come to terms with survival, or how you feel your body within autism, or how you relate to other in any kind of disorder of personality or nervous system, whatever. So if we can just be like a little bit more, anyone can use a word and make it sculpted to how they want it to be, and that they have the right to do that. And just because I use that word and feel it like this, and these are the boundaries I put up and need for me, doesn't necessarily mean that someone else is going to need an exact carbon copy of what I've made. They're a totally different person, and what's needed for me and what's necessary for me and all of those things. I even went on a journey to collect and find, like, me as a 40-year-old, and me as a 43-year-old, me as a 35-year-old, like me as a 20-year-old. God, geez, like the level of personage I had was almost zero. So being allowed to sort of go on that journey of evolving yourself and finding yourself in a time that makes sense to you, I think is everyone's right. So I don't know, I'm rambling on again. Have we had any feedback?
Yeah, people just so it's okay to be sexual. It's a healthy coping skill as well.
Yeah.
Can also be an addiction. And talking about stereotypes. And then they're saying we've had a gatekeeper tell our fox alter that this was wrong for her hashtag pet play and kitten space. Made us question ourselves.
Well, with that, what the thing is, and I can kind of understand it. And I'm the queen of cross hashtagging because I want everyone involved, and I'm a full-on adult. So there's no like, I'm not encouraging minors. I'm not using hashtags. See, that's the thing. What they're saying is when you cross hashtag, you're encouraging adults from a very specific objectified kink space that sexualizes it, and this other end that can include a lot of minors working themselves out in this non-sexual space that could look a little bit like this other space, especially if you start using all these other hashtags that relates to this space. And even if you use these other new hashtags that say safe for work, non-sexual pet play or little space or whatever, it's still an adult dynamic to navigate that sense of self in all these different parts takes skill and practice with self, let alone with other. So that ability to hold yourself safe in that environment whilst you're like advertising for the hard end of the structure, the people that have been in there a long time and know how to play it like this, and if you use that hashtag, that means this, and that means a fair game for all these other things. And like, especially on like the internet and Instagram, and I don't put any of those feelers out.
You
like,
can make a mistake, put the wrong one on, could you? Get mixed up with something.
Well, yeah, I mean, I use the wrong hashtags all the time, and I get told off all the time because I've accidentally used someone's really precious hashtag. But again, I would say, well, there's lots of different meanings of different words, and I'm using it like this, and you're not the gatekeeper of this word. And when I've looked into it, I might actually disagree with how you're even using it. So I'm going to be over here using it in this way because I might want to reclaim that word in some way. Like, everyone's valid. You carry on with your thing because that feels really precious to you, but it doesn't invalidate what feels really precious for me. So the whole getting in trouble for using hashtags, I don't know, what are we using them for though? We're gaining reach, we're advertising our space and our expression, and that puts us out into an online world that has got a lot of personality disorder on it that would be up the narcissistic, sociopathic, psychopathic, and that just use this as a playground. And if you're, getting into their terminology, you've just opened the game up, and you might not have the level of self and personage to stay self while someone else makes you other or objectifies you or diminishes you or gets you into a role play system that you then can't quite get out of, or overrides you or undermines you or objectifies you in a way that you don't like. Now we're here, I better keep my mouth shut, or all these other things. You haven't had enough practice of self. You haven't got out of being someone's daughter or son yet. You know, you still go home and become this other person that you were raised being. And when you leave, you're another person with your friends, or you're another person at work, or you're another person with your partner, unless you're outdoors. Like, all these different changes in who you are and how you are occur. And when you haven't left the nest, especially, you haven't had practice of self. And if you have left the nest, you need to have that practice of self to then be able to hold self with other. And if you're going into a dom sub dynamic, and even without sex, it's still a dom sub dynamic. A lot of damage can be done there. You haven't got the words, the structure, the practice, the human rights, all these things, the contracting skills, none of this stuff available to you yet. Or if it is available to you, in a formative way, it's not stretched its legs, it's not claimed its own life. It's not directed its own life. It's not self-governance. It's in fledgling states of becoming adult, whilst also navigating and contracting and negotiating this other space. And like, I think when it comes through online or kink dynamic or the objectification space or the BDSM part of it, like puppy space and little space, it all reduces down into a BDSM type dynamic, because someone is taking on the adult dominant role and someone is regressing and submitting into the ruled, the one who's being told, ruled, directed, looked after, caregivered. They're diminishing their responsibilities as adult so someone else can take them on. And that requires you, A, to be able to have your adult life, because you can't live there. That's not the destination, destination little space 24/7. Even the people who really are buying into it and they are 24/7 little, they're not 24/7 little. They do work, but they're in the little space gear. That it's always a part of self, but they still have their adult life and can function in it and create all of these things that you need to in terms of being an adult. Work in that triangle of becoming an adult who has skills and is allowed to have all these things that they can express themselves through. So I can't remember what the beginning of what I was talking about this all for is, but did I answer any questions?
Yeah, I think you've covered that one.
Did I cover that one?
Yes or no would suffice.
So when I was getting into the difference between age regression and ABDL play, but like ABDL play, that could be age regression. Someone's age regression could be a nappy or diaper. Like, you just don't know until you're with the individual and what it means to them. And I wouldn't ever want to override what it means to them and what sense they've made of themselves and their life and their thing and this, that, and the other. I would never, even in a counselling relationship, I would only, if I was going to challenge someone's space because I thought, oh, I don't know whether there's something in there that we want to challenge, I would say that. Can I challenge that? And can I check, where are you on this spectrum, or where does it mean in regards to this, or where are your needs met, or what is that in relation to, or whatever, so that they can attach to it more, so that they can explain it more. I would never undermine that they brought this thing and they're telling me about it and, oh, that's wrong, or like, you're wrong to think that. Like, that would be so crushing on someone who's made sense of themselves, just because someone else over here used a totally different word, or used it the same word but in a different way, or felt it like this without the top bit, and it's still totally valid. So when I was looking into it, the therapeutic part of it was saying about body attachment, so reattaching from depersonalization so that you can have a body again. It's a soother. So it's about resetting your nervous system, your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and that whole PTSD, amygdala, hippocampus, fire alarm going off all the time part. It's a defense mechanism. So it can be a space that you go to that allows you to have human rights, or allows you to have your feelings, or allows you to stay mad, or have your emotion, or make a boundary, or say no, or whatever. It can be a security, so it's something that always soothed throughout time, like sucking thumb, or having a blankie, or bears, or remembering that story time was the favorite time of day. Can we reintroduce that so it can feel like I'm safe again? Then there's a nervous system reset in terms of soothing, so that you can reset your emotions, your nervous system, and your chemical balance in your body from a stressed position. And if you have a oversensitive hippocampus and also maybe mania, then you're on high alert to bring that chemistry down into a normal sense. And then you've got the others that go low and they depersonalize, numb out, and they're down here, and you've got to bring them up. So it's always about either bringing down the hyper, or bringing up the hypo into a space of regulation. And then also it can be used as avoidance, which is one you want to look out for. If you're just going there to avoid having your feelings, or contracting, or making a boundary, or doing something that you need to in your life, or being responsible for your adulthood, or dealing with your feelings and past emotions, because we can avoid them in this space. All of that creates an unwell being for the space, and the person you're working with then just becomes a slave to your avoidance, and both of you become codependent in a really unwell being space. So look out, if you're ever going there because you're avoiding stuff, that might be a thing to sort of look at and unpack. And then there was this other part where regression, and I've had this loads of times, helps with recall, or this other sequencing where you know this and this go together. Oh my God, we've got a day. I didn't realize, and that means this, this, and this. And now I understand so much more about what happens to me and why it happens to me in that day in general. So it can do all sorts of things that actually reconnect you and your body to felt senses, to somatic memory. And if you've had childhood or infantile trauma, you're more likely to have somatic memory rather than prefrontal cortex memory that makes sense in a storytelling way. You're more likely to have a smell or a taste or a body or a sensation or a trigger type thing like pool of blood or hold the door or whatever, like a statement might trigger you. So it can reconnect you to your own body and understanding of it and what it's gone through, when a lot of people have zero understanding because it's all in this it's called I always do this when I'm just about to say something because I know it just goes. It's a memory wall. I can't remember the real term. It's like a memory wall that comes down because your body's trying to save you from the trauma of it. And I think that's also why these other markers can go up, you know, like the laxity. It's trying to make your body safe. We all have a biomarker from there was this really good documentary that talks all about it, about rape throughout the ages, created a biomarker in women in general nowadays, where threat or like the threat of trauma creates a response in the female body where their vagina will lubricate in readiness so that it doesn't get as damaged in case of rape. So all women's genome biomarkers have been switched on to get a protective thing happen in threat, just in case, you know. And I think that's also why like the number one female fantasy is rape or threat or overpowering of some kind. It's sort of these two things that genetic biomarkers have happened where we can consolidate what's happened to us and we can live with it a little bit easier and it doesn't damage us quite so much and all these different things. And of course it doesn't mean any of those things, but our bodies evolution response to trying to keep us a little bit safer, you can kind of make sense of it. And in this particular I wish I could remember the name of it, it was so good documentary. It was like revelation after revelation of like, oh my God. So it can create a reconnection to your body. And then there's also the well-being pathway, or you've got to separate it out into whether it's a well-being pathway or a stress reaction. So for instance, my regression that happens because of a trigger or trauma, I've always wanted it videoing because I'm out. I don't really remember hardly any of it, but so much happens that I would like to piece it together. I would like to see it so I can see what happens and I might make more sense of it. But what we do at the moment, because it's so traumatic when it happens, Simon's brain doesn't think like that. He goes into response mode, which is try and not let me have a seizure, which depending on what happens, if I faint and I'm on the floor, it usually means get straight on with keeping my body cool.
It's not as straightforward as just video.
Yeah, set up this video camera so my wife can see what happens.
Rolling all over the place, banging your head up.
Yeah, like,
it's not like you think that I could just put a
camera.
I
know. I don't expect it anymore. It's just out of
it's not
utter
possible.
turmoil and terminal interest of trying to save this from happening that I have an interest in trying to make a difference. But I get in the moment, I don't think he's ever gonna think, let me video this. And then I'm not sure I would ever share it because it is so awful to watch. It is a traumatic thing. So that like regression and that end where it's an involuntary reaction to stress is one end of it. Making it a portal where I go to have my feelings, to reconnect with my body, to reset my nervous system, to create a portal where I can become self again. That's all therapy too. Even if it gets up towards the sexual end, where I'm working on my sexual trauma or my disgust reflex towards the autopedophilia that happens still, or the flashbacking that happens, that I can come to terms with it more, and that sexual shame, and also the child parts that aren't sexual. They don't come out as a kinky space, but they have sexual shame, and they were sexualized and they were abused, so they have sexual trauma. So I have to deal with all of those things. We both, as a couple, very thoughtfully have to deal with those sort of different spaces. There's several different spaces of it, and if you can't communicate it, then I'm going to use the word shouldn't. You shouldn't be doing it, because it's too much guesswork. It's too much can go wrong. You could ruin your entire relationship because you haven't communicated well enough, and then one of you's triggered, and then you haven't responded in the way that they would have thought, and you can end up like feeling so unseen or unheard in both spaces, because, well, I was just trying to do this for you, and like I didn't know, and it can feel really vulnerable. So if you can't communicate it, when I do sex work with couples or with individuals, we always work on them attaching to themselves, then communicating outside of sex to someone else, the person that they do have sex with generally, then finding ways to communicate it during normal sex, like average sex, where we would make a statement that relates to this kink or this arousal zone or whatever. So we're creating statements that can pique the interest of your internal fantasy. And then if we get to super like real easy, like flowing with that, we might then talk about structuring a scene or a space that visits a specific scenario between a couple in a safe way, where they can visit something that feels a lot like it, but that isn't doing the thing. And then beyond that, if they go beyond that and actually they want to enact something with other people, or in an actual doing of the kink rather than reenacting or talking of the kink space. But all of that has happened in a very elongated, super structured, focused, thoughtful, bite-sized piece, contracted, very talked about space in an adult way. And that's where it's got to come from. So if you aren't able to talk, if you are too minor to have your feelings, like you can't verbalize your feelings, then you're not ready for a kink dynamic. You're not ready to present yourself from that space, because you can't keep yourself safe within that spectrum of that space, and you can't stop others from intruding in it. The internet is a public forum, and you could do things that you aren't even aware are inviting the wrong interest, and putting self into vulnerable situation that I then can't talk myself out of. And that's not because you're doing something wrong. Even adults, when they have a full brain structure and they've worked on it and they have all these different things in place, can have a freeze response. There's a whole group of women that go through this rape culturing of themselves because I didn't do anything, and I'm a kickboxer, or I'm a martial arts expert, or I'm a whatever, I'm a feminist. But actually your amygdala and the way your nervous system responds to threat, you cannot override. So you don't know how you're going to respond to threat until you're in it. And if you haven't had practice of making boundaries and holding boundaries and communicating self, and contracting with everyone's needs met, then like it's such a, I would be super careful. You've got to be really thoughtful about it. So the places where this age regression would be more seen are in disorders like schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, schizoaffective disorder, PTSD, major depressive disorder, dementia, and borderline personality disorder. But they can be a normal part of development or a symptom of illness. So someone can have all of these things without any kind of illness whatsoever, and that's a normal part of their structure of self and their development of self, or their ability to express themselves. You know, this whole autism reclamation of we've not got a missing puzzle piece, we're not deformative in some way, we just feel and think differently, and that's perfectly valid from all you neurotypical people. Just because the majority are neurotypical doesn't invalidate that there's this whole portion who are different, and they're like reclaiming their right to be where they are and see it from where they are and be accommodated. So it can be a total normal evolution of self that remains a structure that makes sense to this particular person that has no disorder in it whatsoever. Or it can still be that and have a whole load of disorder underneath it that you have to sort of link together so that you can hold the two safe. Or it can stem from, I want to heal this disordered space, and I think this is a portal towards it, in which case we'll walk towards it from here. So it depends on where you're needing it from and how it relates to you, from where you would approach it. And I'm not going to undermine anybody approaching it from the point that it makes sense to them. I'm just always going to say, widen up the perspective, see the full sense of yourself and what your needs are and how you communicate that, and also what your structure involves. So, you know, is there trauma? Is there any other comorbid condition that might affect how I or someone else can navigate this? And just sort of put it in a functioning way rather than a dysfunctioning way. And the dysfunction, when I have a seizure and all that other stuff happens and I have the psychosis and all those things, that is a reaction, an involuntary action and regression. Whereas me visiting it and us visiting it in a thoughtful space that portals that work, I have a lot less of them. So I think it's pivotal to my body becoming human rights, connected to self, resetting nervous system, letting out stored energy, which my body finds hard to do because it freezes and holds in, and all those things. So it depends on where you're approaching it from. Any other feedbacks? Yeah.
I'll just read through. So, System of the Fear says, thank you so much for explaining it like this. Shy Baby Girl says, I'm a 24/7 little, I work and pay bills. Casey B says, how can you tell when you are a different version of yourself?
So different versions of self. I did a lot of work on finding myself because I would get sort of narrowed down into a role. So when I was being mama, that's all I am. And if they're around, then I'm dedicated to them and I'm very serious about it and I'm very thoughtful about it. And we're going to do all of this, but it can sacrifice me as a body, as a human being, as a person, as someone who needs rest, you know, all of those other things. So first of all, focusing back from all the roles into a self and locating, how do I become me beyond my roles, and where does my body have difficulty in being itself? And for me, when I found Little Space, it made total sense to all the things I found difficult. It just looked like a golden gate to all those things. And so I suppose you've got to go with your own instinct of whether it feels right. There's a visceral response to your body. And then when you do, this makes sense to me, let me go and find my littles. Then it's about sort of really being thoughtful and responsive to how you feel in that space, finding a name that either presents itself or feels relative and feels identifying to it. Inviting it to talk about itself, the personage from this space. I feel like this is my favorite color. These are the things I like it when you say these things, when you use yourself in the third person. Let Papa help you, let Papa do this, Papa loves Dolly, all those sort of things. Being able to communicate those things allows you to I've lost my train of thought. What was the question again?
How it can be a different version of yourself.
Yeah. So locating this version of yourself and investing in it, inviting it in and responding to it, giving it a name, locating its persona. And it might be very different from your adult self, so that you can just viscerally feel when it's around, or someone else can positively trigger it into coming out. Like I can be lost in a role, and Papa will come over and it will just do something that's like, oh, hey, yeah. And then I'm just back. It's like, oh, actually, I do need a wee, and I am hungry, and I maybe just had enough of this right now. Let's just stop. Like he can just in an instant put me back in my body, away from this role. And a lot of people don't understand that when you have a dysfunction in your limbic system, you weren't belonged, you weren't homed, you weren't situated as part of the people that are protected, and we invest in you and we celebrate you. If you didn't have that, you don't have that practice. You're just void of it, and it's very hard to get that practice. So when you go into your roles, you automatically recede as yourself, you sacrifice of self, and you be for other. And if you're a loving and giving person on top of that, then you could like be in real danger, because you could never come up for air. You could be just someone else's something forever. So finding out your parts and really locating them, and like a good way to start it is your body, and like really reinvesting in your body, in your baseline of the Maslow's triangle. Look up on my therapy bubbles, Maslow's triangle. Your base physiological needs: my rest, my play, my shelter, my food, my water, and my libido. And being allowed, and my excretions, being allowed to do all of those things and tend to them and have those needs and respond to them. You can then elevate into, yeah, I do find those things hard. I might put these structures in that help me locate that, do those processes, remain body more often. And it sort of takes you through what you should have done through your upbringing, through this new protocol. And if you don't structure it like that, you could be doing damage instead of well-being protocol. And as long as someone knows what something is for, and what the portal is for you, and what it means to you, and what they can do in helpful situation and what isn't helpful, then they can navigate what your specific perspective and need in it is. And you know, a lot of the time, I mean, we have a lot of similar arousal zones, but we also have very unique ones that the other doesn't find arousing whatsoever, and we can gift them because, well, I don't need to be aroused. I'm gifting you an arousal, and it's all around this thing that you find arousing. And I don't have to take it personally that at the end of it, we're going to have to start from scratch for me because I'm not aroused by this. Although it's nice to give someone pleasure and it feels good, it might not be your arousal zone. You can then like separate things out and be allowed to visit them in ways that make sense to the individual, even though you're a couple. So did I answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I've got a few
yeah.
more.
Crack on.
So is that the dog? Yeah.
It's Dexy.
We're just on the little cuddle, and he's like,
I know, you love Daddy, don't
like,
you?
Come on.
He calls Papa Daddy. My children call Papa Daddy. And I call him Daddy if I'm referring to him for them. because I use his moniker that they make sense of. But if I'm talking to him, he's Papa.
Oh, good boy. We're just holding hands.
Yeah, you like holding hands, don't you?
Yeah. Angel Baby says amazing advice as always.
Thank you.
I love how you talk with your body too.
I'm so gesticulate.
High fives. Thank you for outlining all this. This is so helpful.
Oh, I'm pleased.
Do you practice DBT?
DBT.
Therapy.
DBT. Dialectical behaviour therapy. Brought that out from the backs of my mind. I've looked into that, and not recently, so I can't remember it well enough to explain it to people. But it's basically about realigning your I don't want to use the word malformed, but like your disordered thinking into a more ordered protocol, so that you can save yourself from a pendulum swing in a BPD filter, or you can claw yourself back from a trigger that's no one's fault. Like triggers, it can get to this point where you're triggering me, when really they're not meaning to it. That's the whole point of a trigger. It's an overreaction to a very under stimulation, because we've got this wound that attaches to it. And so if we can like be allowed to have triggers that we look after, as well as also not take personally that people are going to trigger me, and if I'm allowed to immediately respond to, whoa, I'm getting triggered, I'm gonna have to go and do this, it's not such a big deal. Then I'm having to hold in, or I'm having to have a response because I'm not allowed to respond to this trigger, or we don't have our communication, so then someone else does it. It makes the position worse because we're not communicating that we're triggered, or we're communicating that we're triggered, and because we're triggered, we're communicating it in a way that's attacking, that then makes the situation even worse. So we sort of build up into this back and forth of like bat and ball basically. We're making it worse with every serve we do, with every time we hand it back it's a bigger piece of shit, instead of going, whoa, look, we're doing shit bat and ball right now, we're both triggered. No one's going to make sense of anything while they're in their animal threat brain, when they're scared and unsafe and feeling vulnerable. Let's just spend an hour, because usually it takes 40 minutes to an hour to reset your chemistry of a hyperarousal. So take that minute, and the people that want to get it sorted will have to like work on, well, we can't get it sorted, remember the structure of this moment. It's not good at getting sorted. What we have to do is look after, we're in the structure of this chemical reaction right now. Let's let everything finish fizzing before we start like shifting stuff about again. So it then allows you to sort of navigate each individual's knee-jerk reaction, their nervous system response, their amygdala triggers, all of those things. It gets you practicing them in a better way rather than practicing them in a bad way. I was counselling today, and I said to them, we're no different 27 years in. We have the exact same things, but we're so different with them because we practiced. We didn't give up because I'm like this and you're like that. We went, right, I'm like this and you're like that. And the more we do it in a way that makes sense. That's my noise. Yeah. I also do da, 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 da. That means a whole load of other things that I can't be bothered to explain, or that I'm chuntering on. Shut up using all the words.
Okay, I've got another question coming in then before we wrap up.
Oh yeah.
The dog he's called Dexter.
Yeah, after the Dexter off the TV program that we really enjoyed, and apparently it's coming back.
Angel Baby says, can you give me advice on feeling abandoned? I feel angry and grieving for someone who's not even dead.
Yeah, especially if you've been ghosted or you've been...
I could just say, sorry, I missed that question. You've asked that earlier on and I missed it. I wasn't avoiding it, I just missed
it. Yeah. Yeah, and online, especially in long distance relationships and all these things, it's very easy to just cut off, and then it's like you're dead to them or they're dead to you, but not in a way that you can grieve or you can process or you can have closure with. You're just cut off mid feeling, mid attachment, mid everything, that You now have no ability to go and say, well, you will hear me because I'm at your door, and I will have my feelings and I will have my closure or whatever. Once they want to block you, it can be impossible to get back in touch with them so that you can have your closure. And the way that I have dealt with closure, that I haven't been able to orchestrate, and I've had so many times when it's been stolen, like my closure has been abjectly stolen from me because of the way someone else has behaved, and then I've got to reclaim some way of having an endpoint to this thing that, all right, so I'm not allowed any closure here. I do need closure, so I'm going to create a mechanism that helps with that. The way that I did it, and there's loads of different ways, but the way that I did it, which I'll start with, is that I wrote, oh my God, I poured my heart out into 3 or 4 page back on both sides letter to every person that was in this thing that needed closure. I enveloped them, I addressed them, I named them, I put stamps on, and then I did a burning ceremony, and I buried all the ashes and I planted something on top of them. And I'm going to get emotional.
It's all right.
I was claiming my words. I was saying that I'm being heard and I don't need you to hear me because I've heard myself. And I have made this ceremony to honor me, not you, and you don't need to be part of that. So finding a way to grieve. You're allowed to grieve. Someone has treated you terribly. Someone's treated your most vulnerable partner. If you're in a kink dynamic or a little space dynamic or caregiver little dynamic, you have given them your most vulnerable part and they were bad with it. And that is so re-traumatizing it, because it usually comes from a very vulnerable space of either survival or spectrum disorder, or location of self, like just even being a body. It's so vulnerable, and for someone to mistreat that and to so mistreat it that they object it so narrowly into waste and then block. I'm just chucking you away and then blocking you. I don't have to deal with the mess of what I've done and how I've made you feel. It steals from you all of those spaces. So you have to think, I'm allowed to grieve, and it might be through the portal of watching movies that allow you to cry. If you go low, so you numb out and you find it hard to connect with your feelings, to have them, finding a portal that allows you. Quite often, and when I'm really struggling, and I didn't connect this until very recently, in the last couple of years, I used to do this thing where every now and then I would watch horrendous YouTube videos of roller coaster crashes, or people falling off buildings, or someone jumping to their death, or like accidents, or people doing these when they climb up and then they fall off, like all these terrible things. And I didn't know why I was doing it, but I do now. I was doing it because I was so numbed out and I needed to cry. And if that is through the portal of someone else's absolute misfortune or trauma or whatever, it serves a purpose for me to reconnect to what has been numbed away from me, that I can't then process. I can't get from emotion to feeling into well-being and structure and what's the word, functioning, because I haven't been able to process. So sometimes going for the crying movie, or going for the breakup movie, or going for the trauma movie, or whatever, allows you to have the feelings that have been blocked away from you because you're a survivor, or you have a structure of self that makes your feelings a bit harder to locate and process. So in both of those ways, finding that space to have your feelings and then have them, like a proper pity party, full on, tonight's the night, we're going to have a cry, and I've got all the things out, and if it doesn't quite happen tonight, we're going to get the next movie, we're going to get the top 10 tear jerkers of all time, and we're going to make our way through them, and we're going to have these tears. But also the closure routine. If you have been ghosted, leave him alone. Dexter absolutely adores my elephant.
You love
Dumbo, don't you? You just, what does he smell like? He's just delicious. Oh my goodness. Oh goodness me. That is interesting. Wow. Huh? Oh, don't lick him. Don't lick him. So then the closure routine, which may look like what I've just described, or 100 different other things. You can like
no licking.
Google, how do I gain closure alone? And another way to do it is if you visually and thoughtfully create a space away from your home. So you have to imagine yourself walking to it or getting in the car and driving to it. A space to go, a bench by a tree, a grave site, somewhere that you go, this is where you're buried, and this is where I come to visit you, talk to the grave, tell my feelings, have some sorrow, but then I leave it there. I'm able to then go, right, I put the flowers there, I'm going back to my life, and I don't drag the dead body back with me. I leave it there, I leave the carcass there. I just have a space to go. And it might be that you make a memory box that could be the grave, that like gifts you a protocol of going through the objects that you collected up, having the feelings, having the despair, going through the process of these are the emotions and then these are the feelings and this is how I look after them and this is what boundaries I need and these are the closures I need. It takes you through that process that you can then close and put away. Something along those lines where you can actually process and make sense of what's happened to you through the hands of another in an environment that should have been ultra thoughtful. Like the contracting of that space is so precious and delicate and profound that someone mistreating it, well, I was saying you wouldn't mistreat a child, but lots of people do. So that doesn't change the fact that you didn't deserve to get mistreated, and your child part definitely didn't deserve to get mistreated. So how do we recover that? How do we invest in that space? And you know, your little one, your little space, your little inside you is crying and bereaved and lonely and doesn't understand and is confused and traumatized. How do we meet and greet that traumatized child? And it might look like once a month you can get something off your wish list. Once a month I'm going to take you out on an outing, write down 10 things that I'm going to do for you, and once a week visiting feelings through a portal, and then creating a structure of little space that you can visit as an adult that you can put in place. So you still get your meals. Your adult part cuts up your meals, places it all on, puts it on the table, and then your little goes and sits down and eats it all because thank you so much, that feels nice. You can make your bed, your room, your routine around these needs that you can look after too. And really, that is the protocol. I didn't get a caregiver that found my littles. I did a lot of self-work that found my littles, then worked with them profoundly, then shared them a little bit while I was still doing loads of work with them, and then was like, right, I think this is what, and then did 3 months to a year of contracting that space and practicing it and doing the feedback. And Papa does this thing where, got any feedback for me? Do you tell me how it went? La, la, la. So we can. He knows I have struggle in voicing my feelings sometimes, even that he knows to invite them in because he wants to know them. And when you live with someone that struggles to stay attached to their body and then know what their feelings are, you get in the habit of inviting them in because they're likely to just numb out into a robot again. And if you want to be married to your partner, then you're invested in keeping them a human being. You're human being, and it's not narrowed down into one version of themselves. It's a blossoming of all versions of self in a multidimensional flowing configuration. And then when it becomes authentic, it's not about we're on the third weekend of the month, we get rid of the children and we visit our kink space. It becomes an authentic part of self that's nothing really to do with kink space, but it can be. And then you can navigate the two, because now I'm authenticating that I have a need, or I have a part, or I have a configuration of self that has different requirements than this adult structure or this parental structure or any of these other roles in my profession or my full structure of self. So yeah, I get to the end of what I'm saying and think I can't even remember the question and whether I've answered it.
Yeah, I think you have. Yeah.
Did I? So any more feedbacks? Anyone wanting me to go back to anything that I didn't quite cover, or they wanted to direct it just a little bit more, or needs me to, you know, go over something or stretch it somewhere else or invite a different perspective?
I don't think so. We're over time now. So
God, that went quick in the end.
So maybe anyone else now was any more can contact you.
Yeah, DM me, or would you put my autonomy counselling at outlook.com in the comments? You can email me.
You pass me phone.
The thing about getting in contact with me through my Project Snowball charity is that when I email back through that, I think I quite often go to spam. So regularly I will email back someone and not hear back from them, and then try again and think, oh God, they think that I haven't responded, but I respond to every single person. I think sometimes because it's gone into Project Snowball and then I'm responding from autonomy counselling, it will then go into their spam folder. So also, oh no, you won't be on my Skype. I only do that.
I put your email on.
Thank you.
So anyone sees it on there, they can see your email, autonomy counselling.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay.
And I've written a book. If anyone wants to go on a process of becoming self and work on all those structures and find that communication to do with other, I can gift it for free on e-copy, which you just email me and I'll send it to you, or you can buy it on Kindle or paperback. But the paperback I send myself, so it incurs proper postage. So if you're from another country, it can be where it's like between £3 to £20 to post a book.
Depends where you live.
Yeah, depending on where you live. So once we get to the end of this paperback print, I'm gonna re-edit and then do a sort of an up-to-date thing of what's happened since, and do the paperback version with Kindle, because then anyone can buy it for a paperback price without incurring a massive postage fee. But anyway, so thank you so much everyone for coming. This is totally amazing. I'm really glad we did it. Me and Papa, we create this nest at Christmas, and because Papa was ill, it was like, and I have had a lot of injuries. When I'm stressed, I will injure my ligaments a lot more, and my back's been hurting. So we sort of get nestled down into this recovery nest, and then the closer sort of real life and getting back to normal, and like we're in the middle of January now, and it doesn't even feel like we've stepped out the nest. So it's sort of sunk into the ground further and further, like it's become this big hole that we've got to climb out of. But only because it's so enjoyable down here. It feels so cozy that why do we need to get out of here? It's all COVID out there anyway. Nothing's open. Let's just stay in here. So I'm glad we challenged ourselves to get out of our nest and turn up. So anyway, thank you everyone for coming along. DM me, email me, get in touch, stay in touch, and look after your lovely selves. So much love. See you on the next one. Bye bye for now. Say bye, Dexy.